Radha Ramana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya Radha Ramana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Jaya
Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Jaya
Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Jaya
Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Jaya
Radha Ramana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya Radha Ramana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Jaya
Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya
Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Jaya
Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya
Shri Radha Ramana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya Radha Ramana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya Govinda 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 Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Jaya
Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya
Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Jaya
Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya
Radha Ramana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya Shri Radha Ramana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya Govinda
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. Coming to Wisdom Wednesdays. Nice to see you, Graham, Philomena. Hi, Ian. So we're just tracking down our speaker for today. They might join in a bit, but until then, we thought it might be nice to start out with a video or maybe a short icebreaker if we want to go with that. Um, so I had an icebreaker for today, but that was more related to the topic of Ayurveda. Um, so maybe we can continue with that, and that'll be fun. Um, so yeah, I think the icebreaker it was, what is the first word, or what comes to your mind when you think of Ayurveda? I know it's like a broad term. Let me share my screen. Um, yeah. So what comes to your mind when you think of Ayurveda or just the practice itself? Yeah. Or have you heard of Ayurveda? Yeah. Oh, Graham, I think you're muted if you're trying to talk.
I was muted. I thought I was not. Okay.
Oh no.
Ayurveda, I know is it's millennia um, in age. It's a natural form of healing. Um, it's actually influenced Chinese herbal system as well.
Hmm.
It's herbs, and I know I'm touching only the surface when I say it's herbs because it's a lot more than just herbs.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, definitely an ancient practice. I feel like that's something that I've been thinking about recently because when I think about Ayurveda, it's like Ayurvedic diet and people going on to this new trend. So I'm like, whoa, like what is it? But learning about it more. I actually went to this place in India this December, and it's called Govardhan Eco Village. And it's like literally like a spiritual sanctuary, and they teach like yoga, and they have like classes about Ayurveda and stuff. So I was just visiting there, and that's when I really learned that the practice has been going on for a while. And there's people that come from all over the place just to like be at the eco village and learn about the process. So that was really interesting for me. Yeah.
I definitely know that it's an ancient practice. That much I knew, but
Mm, yeah, yeah,
it's more than as I mentioned.
yeah.
I like to think of it the science of being healthy before pharmaceuticals came in. I mean, people were getting sick and curing themselves ages before we had pills. So, getting the science of how to not only, cure illness, but how to live healthy so illness doesn't come to in like even initially.
That's really interesting. I feel like I really want to know more about how people did that like back in the days because it's like when you don't have medicine or like common medicine, it's like you find natural resources to try to help you. So I'm like, oh, maybe because things like that didn't come in, that people's inkling was to take to more natural products and then, that benefits us more. So that's really nice. Thank you for sharing, Ian. Um, uh, Philomena, would you want to share?
Um, yeah. I mean, when I think of Ayurveda, the first thing that comes to mind is like the concept of the elements and the doshas,
Mm,
um, and trying to one bring things into balance, but also recognizing kind of that everybody kind of has their different types and mixtures, and that I appreciate the individuality to it.
mm, for sure. Yeah. I like the individuality because whenever people have told me that they've gone on an Ayurvedic diet, it's like they work personally with someone and they look at what's best for you only, and then they prescribe the medicine, which I think is so amazing. Um, Okay, all right. Thank you for sharing, everyone. So I think today I had a video picked out as well. Maybe we'll hear from Yogi Nataraj next week. Maybe I think they might have gotten something last minute come up. But we're gonna have a talk by SBK Shiv Swami, and he is a really motivational speaker. I personally feel so inspired by him, and he's been practicing Bhakti Yoga for a really long time, and he travels around the world sharing that knowledge, and he's just so pleasant. Have any of you heard any of his talks before or know about him from before? All right,
Yeah,
well,
I've heard of him and listened a bit, and it is very, inspiring and practical, and thank you.
yeah, thank you for sharing. I'm so glad. Yeah, I feel so inspired by him, and hopefully it'll be nice to kind of share that space today with him. This is a talk that he gave at Studio Om, and you can go ahead and share whenever you're ready, but I'll introduce it a bit. It's called Never Stop Questioning, and he talks about how in Bhakti Yoga wisdom, there's this practice of question and answer, and the efficacy of asking questions and asking good questions. That help us with our spiritual life, and he goes deeper into that, and then he also talks about nature of the mind, says the value of selfless service. So it'll be a great talk. Yeah. And then we'll pause in the end just to have some
It's
discussion. Yeah. Sorry, I know you're saying something.
It for some reason it's not letting me select optimize for video sharing. So tell me if it's choppy, because Zoom does that if you don't click it.
The
Okay.
potentiality to ask questions, to be passionately curious about the world around us, that's really what makes for the most dynamic life. Sometimes what happens in a gathering like this is that the question that one person has maybe lies in the heart of another 15 people in the room who don't really want to ask their questions. So it's very beneficial not just to ask your own question, but to hear the questions of others, because we're all looking for the same thing. The Vedic literatures are vast. They're Sanskrit books, and they contain hundreds and thousands, and dare I say, millions of verses of wisdom. But it's said that the very first aphorism in Sanskrit literature, in Sanskrit, goes like this: Atato Brahma Jigyasa, which means now you have the human form of life. You have the ability to question. Benjamin Franklin, the American president, once said, most people die at 25 and they're not buried till they're 75. And it's an interesting statement, because what dies in us at a certain point in our life, although we're already living, sometimes at a certain age something dies within us. Sometimes our creativity dies. Sometimes our sense of adventure dies. Sometimes the sense of a purpose and something meaningful that we're trying to do in the world dies. And then what happens is we're not really living, but we're actually just existing. And perhaps something that may die at 25 is our curiosity. Einstein once said, never stop questioning. Curiosity has its own reason for existing. And so the potentiality to ask questions, to be passionately curious about the world around us, That's really what makes for the most dynamic life. If you look at the people who unleash the maximum potential, they're the ones who are usually asking the most questions. They're the ones who are challenging the present paradigms. They're the ones who are saying, it doesn't matter if we've always done it this way. Is there a better way to do it? And those people that ask those questions, they tend to live the most meaningful lives. And so the scriptures are always encouraging us to question. The Bhagavad Gita is based on a question. Arjuna, the warrior, asks Krishna, what is my dharma? What is my purpose? And in answer to that question, the whole Bhagavad Gita is spoken. Another book is called the Bhagavat Purana. And in the beginning of that book, a king, he gets cursed to die in 7 days, and he asks a question. What is the duty of somebody who's about to die? And in answer to that one question, the speaker speaks 18,000 verses. Be careful when you ask a question. There's another book called Ramayana, which you may have heard of. And there's one question which is asked at the beginning of that book. What are the qualities of an ideal soul? And in answer to that one question, the whole of that book is spoken. So like this, if you look at the scriptures, they're just a series of questions and answers. There's another book called the Mahabharata, in which there's a series of conversations. In one interesting conversation, the god of death asks the great king, the wise king Yudhishthira, many different questions. So for example, he asks him, what is heavier than the mountains? And Yudhishthira's answer, the love of a mother, or the love of that person who brought you up in your life. Because that leaves such an indelible mark on your heart that it's even more imprinted and heavier than a mountain. Yamaraj asks Yudhishthira, what is more numerous than the blades of grass on the surface of the planet Earth? And the king's answer, the desires of the living entity. Endless, innumerable, unlimited desires. Yamaraj asks, what is faster than the wind? And the king Yudhishthira replies, the mind. Because the mind travels at such a phenomenal pace. The god of death asks Yudhishthira, what does one have to give up so that they'll have no regrets in their life? And the king replies, anger. Because anger is one letter short of danger. So one who's patient in a moment of anger saves themselves days of sorrow. He says, what does one have to give up to become wealthy? And Yudhishthira replies, greed. The wealthiest person is not the one who has the most. The wealthiest person is the one who needs the least. He says, what does one have to give up to be loved by everyone? And the king replies, envy. Because our tendency to always compare, compete, and bring others down because they may have something more than what we have, that distances us from other people. The god of death asks him, who is happy in this world? And you know what Yudhishthira's reply is? He says, one is happy if they eat food cooked at home, they don't have to travel far away to earn a living, and they have no debts. It's a good prediction of the future state of civilization. Who in this world can say they eat food cooked at home? Yeah, Studio 108. That's okay. But generally we don't. But food cooked at home is actually a great luxury. Who can say that they don't have to travel miles to go to work? Of course, now everyone works from home. But and who can say they live without debts? Nowadays, by the time you graduate, you're already £60,000 in debt. Therefore, you always have this cloud hanging over you. The simple things. The god of death asks Yudhishthira, what is the most amazing thing in the world? And you know Yudhishthira's reply? In Sanskrit, he says, Ahani ahani bhutani gachanti hayamalayam sheshastavaramicchanti kimascharya mata param. What is the most amazing thing in the world? The king replies, every single day people are dying. And the most amazing thing is, I think I'm going to live here forever. No one has an appointment in their diary, death. But time and tide waits for no person. So he says the most amazing thing in life is our obliviousness to the one thing that's going to happen for sure, which is that we're going to leave this world. So like this, all these questions and all these answers bring about such profound wisdom that helps us to live such meaningful lives, which helps us to live with clarity, which helps us to remember what's really important. Because what happens in life is that we begin walking through this world and our attention gets hijacked by 50 million things. And we end up forgetting what's really important. And so by asking questions and hearing the answers, what happens is it helps to bring life back into focus. And so much of spiritual culture is based on asking questions. So tonight we thought we'd give all of you an opportunity. No question is too silly or too controversial or too complicated, I hope. And I'll try my best to share with you some of my reflections on whatever you ask. And perhaps like this, sometimes what happens in a gathering like this is that the question that one person has maybe lies in the heart of another 15 people in the room who don't really want to ask that question. So it's very beneficial not just to ask your own question, but to hear the questions of others. Because actually, in our hearts, the same questions are resounding. Because we're all looking for the same thing. And therefore, our experience, our human experience in this world is not dissimilar. And so if you listen attentively to everyone's questions, you may see that actually many of them are perhaps your questions as well. All right, so anyone wanna break the ice and kick us off? Okay, that was good. I didn't have to wait long. Thank you. You can tell us your name?
Seven. My name is Seven.
Seven.
Thank you so much.
Nice to meet you.
I'm going to be cheeky and ask two.
All right, we'll send you the bill later.
I know. The second one kind of colors the first, so I'd love to learn a little bit more about your journey, the travels you've been on, places you've been, people you've learned from, things like that. So it's kind of a general learning a bit more about you question. And that's to color my main question, which is the second one, which is in your travels and in your experience, what is the biggest, most prevalent, ever-present question that you find people are asking themselves that they want the answer to?
Wow. If I answer that question well enough, we can just end the session right there. That's like finished. Thank you so much. Such a wonderful question. And so yeah, as I was mentioning, the human condition wherever we go is not dissimilar. Sometimes we're in a session like this and people ask questions and we just have an answer and people are like, how did you answer that question on the spot? So, and I'm like, yeah, I just got asked it about 50 times already. I think the biggest thing, can I say two things? Two things that immediately come to my mind that people are always asking about and that I think 99.9% of us struggle with. One is the mind and things related to the mind. And the other one is love and relationships. I think these are the two things which are affecting practically everyone in this world. One is the mind. And the fact that we don't know how to deal with our own software of our existence, how we perceive things. How do we overcome distraction? How do we overcome negativity? How do we overcome a constant limiting mentality? How do we overcome magnifying things and making them bigger than they are? How do we overcome the inventive nature of the mind, which just comes out with all these things which have no substance in reality? If we could learn how to control our mind, we would be in so much of a better space in our life. And so people are always asking questions centered around the mind. And the other thing that we're all looking for and people always ask about is love and relationships. Last Christmas, I gave you my heart, the very next day. Because we always feel a sense of a frustration, a lack of reciprocation. We always feel like we're giving, but we're not receiving. Sometimes we feel let down. Some people are looking for love. Some people think they're falling in love. Some people are falling out of love. Some people have lost faith that love even exists. And therefore, love is something we're all looking for. It's funny, when I became a monk, I never thought I'd be talking about love as much as I do. But you know, it's very funny, like, that's ultimately what everyone looks for, even monks. We think of love as just romantic love, but love is something much deeper that pervades our entire life. And so people are struggling around love. So we often find ourselves talking about those things. So I would say those two things, the mind and love. And yeah, we have the opportunity to travel the world. When I was 21, I became a monk. That's nearly like 25 years ago. And I've always been a traveler, always moving. I find it incredibly educational just to go around and experience different cultures and learn from different people. And it's beautiful. I think you learn in books, but you realize from your observations of life. For example, I just love being at airports. I find airports a fascinating place because it's the only place in the world where you have a bunch of people who are so varied, who have nothing to do with each other, and who are like so diverse, all in the same place. And sometimes what I do is I go to an airport early, like 3 hours before my flight, and I just observe. I observe people. How do different people react to different things? How do they approach? And it's fascinating just to see how different cultures play out and the principles which people live by. So yeah, it's nice to be, and you have great conversations as well. It's like, recently I was on a flight to Stockholm, So I got on the flight, and as I sat down, there's always that moment where it's like, who's going to be sitting next to me? So I was sitting down, and then this older lady came and sat by, and she sat down, she looked at me and she said, "I'm a lawyer." And she said, and then there was no hello or nothing. She just sat down, she said, "I'm a lawyer." And she said, "I've seen your videos on Instagram. And I like some of them, but I don't agree with a lot of what you have to say." It's like, hey. I said, "You're a lawyer, it's your job to argue with people." Anyway, then we had a really good conversation, and she was very nice person. And then we were landing, and as we were landing, I said to her, "I'm just about to go into Stockholm at the university, and I got to give a talk on the science of letting go." So as we were landing, I said to her, "Do you have any advice for me on the science of letting go?" And then she looked at me, and a teardrop fell from her eye. And she said, "That science, I'm struggling with that." She said, "My husband passed away 10 years ago and I still can't let go." And then we talked about letting go and what that means. And so it's so educational, learning from people. And so, yeah, I feel blessed to be able to travel around the world and learn. Thank you. Thank you so much. Anyone else? Yes.
I have a selfish personal question that is going to help my journey.
Okay, yeah, sure. I'm sure it will help us all.
Thank you. Can you talk to us a little bit about healing others and the process of the heart and the mind? That's going to massively help me at the present.
Thank you so much. So the process of healing others. The first thing, as I would say, it's so beautiful that we have people in the world who want to heal others. In our spiritual culture, we say, if you try to help other people solve their problems, then your own problems begin to disappear. If you try to make other people wise and share knowledge with them, then in the process you become very wise yourself. If you share and try to empower other people in becoming successful, then you become successful automatically. And if you try to actually contribute to someone else's happiness, then you actually feel that happiness yourself. So the first thing is, I would say, it's very noble, and that selflessness is at the very heart of a dynamic life. The Indian writer Tagore, he once said, "I went to sleep and I dreamt that life is joy. I woke up and I realized life is service. I began to serve and I realized service is joy." At the end of the day, what will count in our lives is how many hearts we've touched. When we were monks, we'd often do this meditation. Don't try this at home. Where we'd actually meditate on our own funeral. And we'd visualize the person giving the eulogy of our life. And we'd write down in the meditation, how would I want to be remembered? And then we'd just try to live in a much more conscious way. And we'd realize that we focus so much on the to-do list. But what we really want is, it's related to the to-be list. Who are we? How do we relate to people? How do we touch their lives? So the first thing I'd say is, it's a beautiful thing to want to heal others and to want to help others find peace and happiness and prosperity in their life. I travel around on planes, and there's always that moment before you depart when they say, in the event that the cabin pressure drops, then the mask will fall. And before you put it on anyone else, make sure you... And that concept of the most compassionate people in the world, almost counterintuitively, are the ones who invest in themselves. You can't take the world to a higher place than what you've reached internally yourself. Your best gift and your most powerful gift to the world is your own character, your own consciousness, and your own compassionate heart. So if you want to be someone that heals the world, that's a song, right? Michael Jackson. Heal the world. First, we have to heal ourselves. We have to become wholesome. We have to become abundant. We have to fill ourselves with the spiritual inspiration that we can then share with others. And therefore, even as monks, what we regularly do is we disconnect. Our formula is every year, disconnect for 1 month. Every month, disconnect for 1 day. And every day, disconnect for 1 hour. Disconnect to connect. That was for the Instagram reel. So the first thing I want to share with you is that as you try to heal the world and become an agent of positive change in others, invest in yourself, invest in your own spiritual upliftment, and become abundant in your own consciousness, and then you'll be able to do much more. I could say many more things on this, but I'll just say one other thing. After Krishna has spoken the whole Bhagavad Gita, this ancient wisdom to Arjuna, he says in a very beautiful verse, Iti te jnanamakyatam guyat guyataram maya vimrashe tadasheshena yatechasi tatha kuru. This is beautiful Sanskrit. He says, now I've given you all the wisdom. Think about it. Reflect on it. Introspect. And then do what you want to do. In other words, when we're trying to help others, we have to realize that you can take the horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And therefore, we should have no expectation. We should have no attachment. We should do our best, and then we should realize every soul is on their journey, and all I can do is try to help them. But in the final analysis, they have to do the work. And sometimes what happens is in the process of trying to help others, we take such a burden that I'm a failure, I'm not able to do it, why are they not changing? And we become overwhelmed. But just realize, I can only do my best, and then it's up to them. So much more to say on healing others, but these were some thoughts. I hope that helps. Thank you. Yeah, at the back.
So, I've heard recently that in yogic culture, the mind is seen as part of a subtle body.
Yeah.
If I'm not wrong, as well as the intelligence and false ego. And so, I wonder about how best to understand the relationship of that subtle body to our true identity.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So how does what's the Vedic or the Eastern conception of the mind? I could share that in many technical ways, but let me just share a metaphor that might help to make it clear. The mind is not alive. The mind is material. Okay? Think of the mind as software. You have hardware, so you have a keyboard and a monitor, and then you have the person behind the computer operating it, but it needs a software. It needs an interface, otherwise you can't do anything with it. So the person behind the computer is the soul. That's who we are. The computer, the keyboard, the monitor, that's the physical body. And the software, that's the mind. So the mind is the interface between the soul and the physical body. And sometimes software gets viruses, which slow everything down. So that's what the mind is. And perhaps the best metaphor to understand the mind is think of the mind as an internet browser. An internet browser is not alive. Yet what the internet browser will do is it will come up with options, there'll be pop-ups, they'll store what you've done in the past and then give you recommendations. But it's not alive. It's just a mechanical thing. So therefore, a browser has a home page, right? So in the same way, our mind has a home page. It has a default way of thinking. A browser has a history, right? So our mind also has a history of all the previous experiences that we've gone through. A browser has a favorites, right? So our mind also has a favorites, things that it clings to. A browser has an autocomplete, so that when you type www.a, boom. So similarly, the mind has an autocomplete. When it sees one thing, another 10 things naturally come as a consequence of seeing that one thing. Can you change the home page on a browser?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you delete the history on a browser?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you readjust the favorites on a browser?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you delete the cookies and the autocomplete on a browser?
Yeah.
So in the same way, you can change the browser of the mind. But the world doesn't know this technology. The technology of how to configure the browser of your mind so that it can take you to the websites you want to go to instead of diverting you on 50 million other things that are not going to help you in your life. And so that's the science of spirituality. That's the science of the Vedas, to teach us how to deal with the subtle technology that drives our very experience of day-to-day reality. And that's what the mind is. I hope that helps. Thank you. Yes?
Hi, if you could teach the entire world one lesson, what would it be?
Okay, that's another one for an Instagram reel. If I could teach, that's a hook, right, on an Instagram reel. You earn a living by what you get, but you earn a life by what you give. Contribution, selfless service, meaningful purpose for the benefit of others, and using your God-given talents, abilities, and aptitudes to make the world around you a more beautiful place. If we all would move in that direction, the world would be a much more beautiful place. Once there's a samurai tale that a student asked his teacher, what's the difference between hell and heaven? So he gave him a vision of hell, and there was a dinner table and there were bowls of soup, and then everyone came to sit around the table and everyone was emaciated and suffering. And what happened is everyone had a hand which was like a spoon, but it was really long. And so it was excruciating because nobody could eat anything, the soup, and everyone was just suffering. And then the samurai teacher gave him a vision of heaven. And the amazing thing in heaven, it was the same dinner table. It was the same bowls of soup. And it was the same people who had hands as spoons. But in heaven, what were they doing? They were feeding the person opposite them. And the teacher told the student, you don't have to change anything in this world. You just have to change the mentality from selfishness to selflessness. Look at every single problem in the world, whether it's a political problem, an economic problem, an environmental problem, a social problem. It all has its root in selfish desire. When we seek to exploit others, then from that all problems come. Therefore, Einstein said you can't solve the problems of the world with the same type of thinking that created them in the first place. And so that's what we're really trying to share with the world. A life based around selfless service, contribution. Thank you. Yes.
What do you think is the correct way to get to the human population to end the enslavement of animals, food, fur, furniture, etc.? What do you think is the right way to?
How do we educate the world in that?
To stop it is, yeah.
Yeah. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is sharing wisdom with Arjuna. And the very first piece of wisdom that he shares is about identity. And he says, we're not these bodies, but we're all spiritual beings. We're spiritual beings. Every single thing which is living is spiritual. A tree is a soul. An animal is a soul. A human is a soul. And therefore, the only way in which we can really go in a direction where people will begin to respect all life is when we understand that all life is spiritual. While we see other beings simply as matter, you see, the first step to exploiting something is to depersonalize it. When we depersonalize the environment, then the next thing is we're going to exploit the environment. But in Vedic teachings, the environment is spiritual. It's alive. Trees are alive. They're a soul. Therefore, how can you exploit the environment? How can you exploit animals? Nobody would eat meat if they had to actually go and kill the animal themselves. Who would do that? We just don't do that. Therefore, to share with the world the spiritual essence of everything around us. Like I studied at UCL. So I remember once I came from the temple, so I was going to university. And I got to university and it was the Stop the War Coalition. So they had a table. So someone kind of like jumped out. He nearly rugby tackled me actually. And he said like, we're having a demonstration. Thousands of people are dying. And I looked at him and I said, what happens when people die? He said, what do you mean? I said, what happens when people die? So he wasn't expecting that question. So he said, well, we're just chemicals. We just go back into the earth. So I looked at him and I said, well, then if everything's matter, then nothing matters. If we're just material beings, if we're just chemicals, if we came from nothing, if our life is meaningless, if we then go back into the earth and that's it, game over. And basically we're just material entities, why do you have so much reverence for life? And he said, no, but we're living, we're something more than just matter. I said, great, now we're talking. What more are we? We need to educate people that we're more than matter. And when we educate people that we're more than matter, then the natural compassion, care, sensitivity will automatically come in. But if you try to create non-exploitation without teaching people about the spiritual essence and identity, that kind of effort won't last and go very deep. So the deepest way to create a non-violent world is to teach people that there's a spiritual essence in everything and therefore it must be respected. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because I like the fact you touched on not killing, even just killing people. It's wrong,
Yeah.
but we do it. You know?
Yeah, definitely. It's such a violent world that we live in, and it goes on. If you exploit the environment, it's only one step more to then exploit the animals. And if you exploit the animals, it's only one step more to exploiting your own fellow human beings. And it's just knock-on effect because it's a lack of spiritual vision. Thank you. Yes?
I have a question. Maybe just
All right, everyone. We'll come back into the space. But just wanted to open up some time for reflections, questions, or anything else that anyone wanted to share from the talk that we heard today. Gary, you want to start?
I heard him say Brahma. To me, Brahma, my Sanskrit is not that, I'm very limited on what I know the concept of karma and dharma, but Brahma, I heard that, and I was just intrigued by that.
Yeah. What was it that you noted? Was it Brahma or Brahman?
I think it was the first one.
Was it this? What's the one I put in the chat?
Well, it was when he was talking. It was, I think, the first or second question that he was answering.
That's interesting. Yeah. So from my knowledge, like Brahma is um in the Vedic literature, he's known as like the first created living being.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I'm not sure what context it was talking about it. And Brahman is a different here, I can put it in the chat. This is also one thing that I've heard, but I'm not sure if he was referring to that. That is a completely different thing though.
Well, I know that in the caste system, Brahmin is one of the higher, is the priesthood.
Oh yeah. So I think that's like Brahmana, like where they're kind of like the sages that direct society the right way. That I know of. And then Brahma, it's different. But I'll definitely go back and see if we can catch that. But yeah, they're like it's confusing because it's like Brahma, Brahmin, and there's like three different variations. Yeah, Ian, go ahead.
Yeah, only if you guys are done, but I just wanted to share something I liked in the video, which is I really liked how he used the analogy of like our us being a computer, and I think that analogy held very well with like just tabs, the favorites bar, and autocomplete. Autocomplete was something I really liked because I think especially my brain tends to do that a lot, and it's if I were to take it in the analogy further or reword it, it it's like a example of how the places we visit the most have the most influence on us, and that's what we remember. So to an extent, it's like the people who we are around, so on and so forth. That is what we will autocomplete and remember the most.
Yeah. Yeah. I also liked along that point you were saying that he mentioned that you have the ability to change who is in your favorites tab and who's in your, different sections of your life. And I've been thinking about that in terms of relationships and how sometimes I'll have a good relationship with someone, but then life takes a different turn and that relationship changes. Or if I have something come into my life and it's not really adding anything positive, it's like bringing me down, then I'm like, I have the ability to change that or take that out of my life. So in that way, I felt like I had more control over what I was giving to myself. And if it's like not benefiting me in a positive light, like you have the ability to kind of change that. So yeah, thank you, Ian.
I'd have to say that what was really moving about his speech was how everything is spiritual. It's, this is universal. It's not just in this part of the world. The Japanese have this concept of everything having kami. Kami is like spirit. Even rocks have kami. But I'd have to say, having grown up being omnivorous, so eating meat, and I have to confess, and I hope I'm not stepping on anybody's toes here, but I used to hunt rabbits, and now I tell people I've given up my murderous ways, but people would ask me, why do you kill rabbits? How can you do that? And I said, do you eat meat? Yes, but that's not the same. I said, how is it not the same? Because I'm out there and I'm taking the place of a tiger or a wolf or a fox, and I'm taking that creature's life to, and I didn't do it just for trophies. I mean, I would, rabbit, when you look at it, is very good eating, but it was for the protein. But when people would say to me, "You fool, okay, you eat meat, you're just paying the butcher to slaughter the animal." And I mean, now, hey, I'll eat meat when it's offered, but if I have a choice, I generally don't. On Tuesdays, I go to the Spanish discussion group in this Mexican restaurant in Bellevue, and the guy usually says, "Oh, this is the guy who drinks horchata, which is a almond drink. It's like almond milk." And then I usually order quesadillas, which is just with cheese. Don't you want that with chicken? Not really. And then he served it with chicken, and I said, I really don't feel at night. I don't like to eat meat. I'm not completely vegetarian, but we don't need meat for protein. We need more salt for vegetarian. We need more vitamins, but still, I've come to the conclusion that if we all were vegetarian, again, there wouldn't be so many problems with fooling animals. I don't know. I'm kind of going off in all directions.
No, I like it. I think I think it connects, and I really appreciate the discussion and reflection part, because it's you start from one thing and then you find there's so many threads along that one topic. So
Yes.
as you were going through, like I was like, yeah, there's different things, but somehow in my head I was like, oh yeah, this is making sense. Like, okay, I see where I see where you're going. Um, but yeah, I feel like I didn't eat meat like I mean, I am a vegetarian now, but we used to eat meat, and it wasn't until we found like a spiritual practice to go into that the inclination to stop it didn't come. And I feel like it's not the same for everybody, and everybody has their own journey and their own purpose and what they value. So I really appreciated you kind of going through that, like with your life. That was really helpful. Thank you. Anyone else wanna end us off for tonight? Otherwise, we can talk about some upcoming events coming up.
Well, I just had a couple of thoughts that I wanted to share.
Yeah.
So they said don't spend time meditating like on what your funeral would be like, but I'm a cancer survivor, so that warning has come about 12 years too late for me. But like I do think that like it's so I've already spent a lot of time kind of thinking about how I want to be remembered and what have you. And that I hope that I'm remembered like for doing, you know, some kind of good in the world, which also brings me to the other thing that he was talking about with not like investing like so much of yourself in if you're trying to help someone and they don't accept it or they ignore it or what have you, like not thinking of yourself as a failure. Because like in the job that I do in the hospital, I have to do a lot of work with people that use drugs and alcohol and what have you. And sometimes it does get really discouraging to kind of constantly be having those conversations with people and then not seeing like significant changes. And so that is something that like I do try to do with like really focusing on like, well, like all I can really do is like my part, which is, you know, providing the care and the support and the resources. And at the end of the day, kind of reflecting on like, well, like I did the best I could in the job that I have to do.
Yeah. I think that's I think your job is amazing, Philomena. I don't think a lot of people could do what you do in our world. So thank you for giving back in that way. And yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to have these conversations. Like they're difficult, especially if they're happening in front of you and you're kind of the one giving that advice and care. Um, but yeah, I agreed with what you were saying, like doing your part, because at the end of the day, it's like really much like, you know, you don't know what's gonna happen, what's gonna come in the future, but it's like, okay, I did my part to the best, and now I'm just gonna leave it out. So I appreciated what you said there. Thank you for sharing. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I really enjoyed the talk and the discussion. And I just wanted to share some events coming up at Bhakti Studio / Mantra House. So as always, we have our Soul Fest this Saturday as well, right? And we have one this Saturday. Okay, perfect. We have a special one coming out on May 17th, and it's with Madhava Das, and he is a really renowned kirtan leader. His kirtans are streamed on SoundCloud, YouTube. You can check him out there. But we had him about come last year about the same time, at about the same time, and it was amazing. So meditative, and then it took beat in the end, and it was just a wonderful experience. And he's been doing kirtan for a long, long time. So like that's his primary service, you know, giving to the world through music. So if you are in town and can make it, please come to that kirtan on May 17th. But either we'll see you this Saturday, next Saturday, or on Wisdom Wednesdays next week. Right. Thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you.
Bye.